Well, good afternoon, everyone. It's the third Thursday of the month, so it's time for Tech Tips Live. Welcome. It's a lovely September day here in Goshen, Indiana, and our tornado test is done. So we will get on to the task at hand. Thanks again for joining us. It's great to have you here and people from all over the country and all different types of manufacturing setups. We are still, some of you may be new again to Ring Central, a little bit different than WebEx. So just take a minute to familiarize yourself with where things are at now. For questions and answers, if you're full screen, down in the lower center, you see the Q&A button. And you can select that and type in questions, and I will be watching for those. There's also a chat button. And if you want to see, well, I'm not sure how much you guys can see the participants, obviously. I can here. So again, I'm Phil Mason, Vice President of Business Development for Hertzler Systems, and I've got Chris Bowman with me today. You can go ahead and click to the next slide, Chris.
Good afternoon.
So we are going to be talking about short run SPC, and Chris will be our technical resource. Chris, how many years have you been working for Hertzler Systems now?
That would be 22 and a half or so. I started in February of 1998.
Fantastic. It's great to have Chris with me here today. Last month, you all, those of you who are here, we had Ian, who's our newest person in CSD, and we're bookending today here with Chris, who's our most experienced person out in the field. If there's something to be seen, Chris has probably experienced it at some point, and we certainly are so happy to have that wealth of experience. And today, Chris will be sharing with us some of the things he's learned about with short run SPC and how that works with GainSeeker. So go ahead, Chris, advance to the next slide. As we've gone through this series this year, we've looked at our platform, and today we now are looking at different ways to make those data-driven decisions and how we think about it. We have the little brain icon up there in the upper corner. Short run is common, yet there also are not that many people using it that actively. And even with what we would consider kind of normal manufacturing, there still may be places where short run makes sense. I've been looking at some things and working on some promotional ideas or kind of marketing materials, and there's a part of me that I'd love to call it something different than short run, because everybody kind of sees that short run and then dismisses it and says, oh, you know, that's not what we're doing. But it really, because it is sometimes more about performance of a process, and changeovers are so quick these days, manufacturers change parts so often, that I think we are looking at more processes. And with the advent of more IoT, we also have many more sensors that are just monitoring processes that are not so much, again, about what the parts are, but what's going on with that process and what's the capability of that process. So those are all part of things. At this point, the whole world still calls it short run, and that's how we talk about it. And Chris is going to get under the hood and give you all some nuts and bolts, so that if you really want to, if you have runs that have less data, quick changes of product, you'll be able to get a process capability that makes sense and gives you some idea of how a process is running. So I won't hold us up anymore from the juicy content here. So go ahead, Chris, take it away.
Thank you. Okay, in a nutshell, what the short run capability allows you to do is to combine data from multiple GainSeeker standards into a single data set and then analyze that. Now, to a lot of people, this may seem like, what? Why would you ever want to do that? You never, ever, ever combine data from different processes into a single control chart and a single data set. Well, that is definitely true, but sometimes you may have data that really all comes from the same process that is stored under different standards. An example for this was many years ago, I visited a customer who was manufacturing springs, and a particular spring, a particular diameter, gauge, type of metal, tension spring might be cut off at a bunch of different lengths, and those were all different products. And it was all done on the same machine. So, you know, the length standard was all over the place based upon the different GainSeeker standards, the length specification, but it was really all coming from the same process. That would be an example where you might want to use short run. So to take a look at this, here's an example where we have 6 different standards, all with different specifications, different targets, different sets of data, but they may actually all really be reflecting the same process. And the short run capability allows you to take that data and put it into a single data set and then look at it and analyze it as a whole. This is the only way really that you can take data from multiple standards and put it into a single data set for SPC. So why would you want to run short run functionality or use the short run functionality? Well, sometimes, particularly in today's more agile environment, where we are trying to keep down the amounts of volume of production we keep, and it's all more just in time, we're doing a lot more short runs, or our customers are doing a lot more short runs. And sometimes when those rapid changeovers and whatnot, you actually don't really have the ability to get a good glimpse of what your process is doing before you're changing over to a different product. So when you have short runs of parts, then you might need to be able to use the short run capability to get a good look at what your process is doing. So that's why you would do short run. As far as how you would do short run, well, there's a number of steps that have to be done to GainSeeker before you can start using the short run capability. The first thing you want to do, or you need to do, is you have to select a traceability field to be used as the short run standard. The most common example for this would be like you have a machine traceability field. In the GainSeeker Tour database, that would be traceability field 4. Now, one of the limitations of GainSeeker is that you can only do short run on the first 6 traceability fields. And since the second traceability field, which is normally reserved for shift, is only 1 character long, you really only have 5 traceability fields to select from. Once you have selected the traceability field that you're wanting to use for your short run, you will want to set up an additional index on the database. Technically, you can do this without that index, but so if you're doing short run retrievals on an unindexed field in the database, your performance will suffer significantly. Finally, you need to create what we call the process specifications. These are the short run standards. When you create the short run standard, you are basically putting in the value that will be in the traceability field you have selected. If your traceability field for machine has a value or a number of data records in your database as a value of, say, 1400 for a machine, then you could create a standard 1400, and when you retrieve data under the short run functionality, it will retrieve all the data where the machine traceability field was set to 1400. Now, just throwing all that data onto a single control chart is also probably not going to do what you want to do, especially if you have, say, in my spring example, you might have had a part number where the target was 1 inch, another where the target was 2 inch, a third where the target was 4 inches. And if you throw that all onto a single traceability control chart, you're just going to have sets of data all over the place. So you've got to figure out a way to code the data so you can look at it on one control chart and have it make sense and give you valuable information. So when you're creating the process specification, one of the things that you have to do is select the short run method for combining that data. The most frequently used one in my experience is the target nominal. The target nominal basically takes all of the data and it subtracts the actual measured data value from the target value that you have set up on the limits tab. and then that's what's being displayed. So in effect, it's converting all of your data from an actual measured value to the offset from the target. So think back to my example where we had 1 inch, 2 inch, and 4 inch length springs. All that data, every data value for the 1 inch springs would have 1 inch subtract from it. So if you were 1/100th of an inch above target, the data point would say 0.01, and so on and so on. There are 4 different methods for your short run coding options. Those methods include, as you saw, the target nominal. This method is what you would typically use if you have similar variation for each product, but it also requires that all subgroup sizes are the same. The range method is what you use when you have consistent subgroup sizes, but the variation is different across the different products. So for example, if you tend to increase variation as the target value goes up, then you might need to use the range method for this short run standard. The standardized method is about the only method you can use if you have different subgroup sizes. And the stats on how that works and whatnot is all and for all these methods is all defined in the online user guide. Finally, we have the uncoded method. This just returns the data exactly as it was stored. Charting and analysis. To be able to analyze data in short run, you will need to basically click over here on the right-hand side because it's going to be defaulting from part number, or you may also see the priority list, but once you have created your short run standards, you should have a process option over here on the right. Once you've selected that, you will see the process standards. While rare, it is possible for you to have set up process specification standards on more than one traceability field. If that's the case, then you'll have different options down here. So once you basically have switched over from a part number list to a process spec list, then your list of standards will change. You can pick one of these, and the GainSeeker Charts module works just the way it always does. You click on this, you can pick chart, you can choose settings and select your date time period, apply filters, etc., etc.
So Chris,
yes,
Chris, for the people that we have listening here today, if you go back to your slide there, the previous one, if they've been using GainSeeker in more the traditional, the long run way, and they set up a couple process specs and had their traceability set up so that the field they wanted to work on is in that in one of those first 6, they can test out and try and do some short run calculations at any point. I mean, as long as, like you said, they have a common specification like that cutoff length that can have that nominal subtracted or something like that, right? The great part about this is you can go back after the fact. Granted, there's a little bit of setup, but if somebody hasn't been using short run, they could actually go back and assess some data that way.
Oh, absolutely. Typically, when people are storing the data, while it is possible to store the data in short run mode, typically when people are storing the data, they store it in normal standard mode, which means all of the data that you're looking at when you're looking at short run was stored with the conventional standards. And you are just simply changing how you're retrieving the data and and there's some calculations that are being done to modify the data as you retrieve it. So once you set up your short run standards, when you pull up data, you're looking at all the data that you've always been looking at, that you've always had available. You're just looking at it in a different fashion.
Yeah, good. I just want everybody to be clear that just because you haven't been doing it, you could set up a couple things and start today.
Yes, I'll go ahead and jump off here for just a second. So everyone should now be seeing the GainSeeker charts screen. If I click on SPC charts, I can click on process for short run, and these are two that are set up in the standard tour database, the manufacturing database. If I click on one of those, I can select what type of chart. I can go in and I can choose a date time period, apply a filter. When I click OK, it will build that chart. Now, if I look at this, at the data table behind this chart, this is the data that you've always been looking at, where you've typically before you've retrieved it looking at the part number and the date time. Now this is retrieving it based upon the machine and the date time. The machine the machine being 1055 cutoff, because that's what the process specification was.
Right.
So all of the data that was previously in the database and you were looking at in non-short run mode is now being retrieved where the machine traceability value is set to 1055 cutoff. This data went through whatever encoding method was selected for this process specification, which we can take a look at. See, this is using the range short run method. So it is taking every single one of these data values and it is subtracting the target and then it's dividing it by the range. That's all defined in the online user's guide.
Okay, good.
So you do not have to store additional data to use the short run functionality. Once you've set up your index, created your process specifications, you should be able to look at the data that you've always been looking at, just in a different fashion. Now, one of the things to keep in mind, if you have done like what most of our customers have done and only put in the machine or whatever your value was that you're using for short run in the traceability field, if you have selected or been storing multiple parameters for whatever products you're measuring, and you retrieve all of the data where the machine is equal to, say, 1055, you're probably going to get, say, different parameters being retrieved in the data set. For example, if you're measuring the height, the length, and the width, all for a particular part number, and it's all going through that machine 1055, if you set up a short run standard for machine 1055 and retrieve all the data, it's going to be combining all three of those parameters, which is very much not what you would want to do, because those would certainly be different processes. So if you have set up your traceability fields that way, you will need to filter to make sure that you're only getting, say, the length when you do this short run retrieval. You can create a filter that looks at, say, the part number field and says, give me only the data where the part number contains length, or only the data where the part number contains width or machine. That's how you can do that if you don't have both the machine value, the traceability value, and the parameter here in the traceability field. As you can see in the tour data set, we combine those two values into that traceability field. That has some major advantages when you're using short run, but it has some additional complexity when you're setting up and saving the data, because obviously you won't want the operator to have to pick three different machines, three different values for the machine traceability value when they're saving the data. One of the common questions I have when I have someone ask about short run is, well, hey, I do capability studies on a particular standard that's part-based. If I switch over and start looking at short run standards, short run specifications, may I do a capability study or ask those type of stat questions? And the answer is yes. But when you to do that, just like in a regular part number based standard, you will have to create limits as well as in the process specification. that would contain the specification limits. We can't do a capability study without specification limits. And you'll have to encode that value in those limits. An example of that would be if my specifications were, going back to my spring example, if my specifications were 1 inch plus or minus 5/100ths of an inch, 2 inches plus or minus 5/100ths of an inch, 4 inches plus or minus 5/100ths. Then my short run standard would simply have an upper spec of 5/100ths and a lower spec of -5/100ths, if I was using the target nominal method of calculating a short run encoding. I hope that's making sense to you. There is more information for that and on that in the online user's guide, which is a great source if you want to start thinking about using short run.
Okay. I've got a question here for us to ponder, Chris, and we may have to get a little clarification. So Luis is asking, what do you think about using short run for molding machines? It would be a valid method no matter the parts going through the machine, even if they're very different from one another. And my first reaction, and I'll let you, then you can answer, Chris. My first reaction is I think the key there is what are the parameters or the characteristics that you want to compare, because sometimes molding machines, your molds can be very different, but definitely there would be parameters that you could monitor that would be that. And Luis, if you want to add to your question to maybe what you had in mind, but how would you answer that, Chris, in terms of short run with a molding machine?
Well, I think you pretty much hit the nail on the head there. I would have to be looking at exactly what parameters that they were trying to look at in short run mode, and I would have to look at the processes that were involved in shaping the values that were being measured. I could see that this could very well apply in a lot of cases, but in other cases, for example, there's so much impact upon the process by the cavity that there'd be areas where that might not be a good choice. It would vary a lot based upon the exact details. I'm sorry, I can't give any more detail on that than that. It really is something that would have to be looked at in a specific instance.
Right. And I don't know if Luis has any other follow-up. If any of the rest of you have questions, go ahead and post them here in the Q&A. Again, we've got that down in the lower center of your screen. You can type your question in there. I know we do have a lot more clients who are comparing things like tooling and process parameters and what has the better yield. I forget, Chris, did you work on that with our client there, our patty maker in St. Louis, on their plates and looking at those process capabilities?
I have, and they have had a lot of success in identifying which products work better on different plates, both in the St. Louis location and the other location that we've worked at. That a lot of that was done not so much through the short run as it was through just some of the basic grouping functionality, but it's a lot of the same concept. And just like there is overlapping tools and concepts and whatnot here, this isn't intended to replace OEE by any stretch of the imagination, but by looking at it this way, then you can get an idea if, for example, certain of your products do run better on certain machines or within a machine on certain cavities and whatnot.
Right.
This is just another tool to put in your toolbox for analyzing and trying to see how can you get the best performance out of your equipment.
Yeah, and you're right. It's complementary to OEE, but really different in OEE and looking at the factors of your uptime and availability. And
yeah, this wouldn't look at any of those two tiers of OEE.
Right.
So it gives you some information in the same direction, but it is not at all the same thing. Didn't mean to imply that it was.
No. No, just fine. All right.
Any other questions?
Not that I'm seeing here right now.
Okay.
All right. Well, I just, again, to review, yeah, thank you, Chris. Actually, getting up to our next one. Thanks for doing that. October 15th. The third Thursday is very early in October, as the first is that Thursday. So just a little bit around a month from now, data in and data out. So we'll be talking a lot about exporting and importing and out to other programs and how that's accomplished. And you know, as much as we think that GainSeeker as a product is a place where you can, you know, you should be able to do everything. We also understand the reality of there are a lot of other software products and other devices out there that benefit from those exchanges of data. So we'll be digging into that in more depth next month. You can get to our website to sign up for that. And all of you who are here get our emails, obviously, and we will get this recording posted. So if you want to pass it along to other people in your company or come back and listen to it, it should be up here shortly. So I don't think, if we don't have anything else here, we will wrap her up just a couple minutes early. Chris, thank you so much for your presentation and sharing some of your knowledge of short run and GainSeeker.
No problem. Thank you for joining us.
All right. Thanks for everybody who tuned in today for Tech Tips Live. We hope to see you in one of our future episodes. Have a great rest of your week, everybody.